Six Flags. My first time going. Can't wait to have a Six Flags day. Oh, come on, really?
Attention riders, we are currently experiencing a short delay with Twisted Cyclone. We do not know when it will reopen yet, but we hope to get it running in a bit.
Bruh. So recently, I visited Six Flags Over Georgia in Austell, Georgia for my first ever time. This park is a charming major park with some elite coasters. I really like the roller coaster collection of Over Georgia, but my first visit was very much flawed. Normally when I go to a new park, I like to make a top 10 video. However, my day at Six Flags was an absolute shit show. I only managed to ride 7 of the coasters there because of time constraints and very poor operations, which I will get into deep in this video. However, those poor operations did give me the idea for this video, where I narrate my day at a park on that specific day, and Six Flags Over Georgia is a great first start since that was a mess. So with that being said, this is my visit at Six Flags Over Georgia on March 22nd, 2025. So this story begins with me getting dropped off at Six Flags with 2 mutual friends. We'll call them Emily and Olivia. We're not exactly friends, and honestly, they aren't exactly relevant. They were basically just NPCs just hang out with me for the day. The reason those girls were even with me has to do with how I went in the first place. 2 weeks prior, my aunt who lives with us asked if I wanted to go to Atlanta. Now, she never goes anywhere out of state unless someone invites her. Confused, I asked, why? Turns out her friend invited her to go to a wedding dinner in Atlanta in the Goliath area. So I agree to go, so I can go to Six Flags Over Georgia. That friend who invited my aunt is Emily and Olivia's mom, and when I told them my plans, she asked the girls if they wanted to go with me to Six Flags. Despite the fact their home park is Six Flags Over Texas, they agreed to go because it's not like they have anything else to do. We arrive shortly before the park opens for the day at around like 10:45. We go through security and scan our tickets. That part was swift and easy, with no issues getting into the park. First impressions, the park looks nice. When we got inside, the first thing we did was Twisted Cyclone. This is the RMC conversion of Georgia Cyclone, and it's an excellent coaster. Despite being short, this RMC has several pops of ejector airtime, particularly the wave turn in the middle of the ride that provides sustained ejector airtime to the side. Such a punchy coaster. Great for us, it was only a station wait as we rode it right before the park opened. It's worth noting that Over Georgia typically opens Twisted Cyclone and Georgia Scorcher 30 minutes before the park opens, and a lot of park goers don't realize those coasters open early, so we were able to ride Twisted Cyclone within about 5 minutes. After we got off, we backtracked to Georgia Scorcher to see if the coaster was still a short wait. Stand-up coasters are notorious for painstakingly slow dispatches. This is because each seat has to be adjusted individually relative to the rider's height, and when we got off, it was already 11:02, so we checked the queue line and the coaster already had a long wait, so we opted to skip Scorcher to head to Daredevil Dive. This is the Gerstlauer Eurofighter that is notorious for quite a long and slow queue. See, Daredevil only holds 6 riders per train, so even though the coaster ran 3 trains and decent operations, the line moved at the pace of a snail. So we headed there next, and Emily and Olivia got a little nervous because they haven't encountered a Eurofighter before. As I said, they live in Texas, and they're not even coaster enthusiasts. So to explain rides here, I've mostly been comparing coasters here to the closest thing Over Texas has had to them, but a few models here don't exist in Over Texas. That also includes a Eurofighter, so yeah, they were a little shocked, but that feeling of nervousness went out the window as soon as we entered the queue line. And of course there's no theming, which for Six Flags that's fine since I'm mostly on my phone for 90% of that queue. Now when we waited, the line was filled to about 1.5 switchbacks into the station, yet that alone took 20 minutes because of that low capacity, and by the time we were next, the line was twice as long as when we entered the queue line. That's a running theme throughout the day, is that the lines are always longer when we get off than when we entered. We got on the train and thank goodness, lap bars. This makes Daredevil more smooth and comfortable, and that's good because I like Daredevil Dive. The coaster has a punchy first drop, a couple of great inversions, and some wacky elements. Has some pacing issues, but overall, it's a decent coaster, and a comfortable one at that. And the girls said the coaster was not that bad either. They said after the first drop, Daredevil was light work. Nearby, we headed straight for Goliath, the elite B&M Hyper known for airtime and positive G's. And this Goliath dawned over the park. You can see this Hyper from anywhere anywhere in the park, and even outside the park for that matter. Approaching Goliath, the station is a literal gray box. There's a short queue on the staircase into the station, and finally, decent dispatches. A running theme this day is that the coasters have such slow dispatches that it causes slow moving lines. You're really gonna see this later into this video, but Goliath had decent operations as dispatches were around a minute 30 seconds. So the line was only 10 minutes long, and Goliath was the best coaster at this park. The ride is littered with several airtime hills that lift you up with sustained floater airtime, and the airtime gets stronger as you progress through the layout. The finale in particular has borderline ejector. Complementing the floater is an intense turnaround helix and an aggressive finale, and since Goliath just got new paint, it's looking fresh as the new paint for coasters is the equivalent of haircut for men. After Goliath, we entered the dead end that is Gotham City. We entered this area and Gotham was easily one of the blandest areas in the park. Now I am aware Six Flags has bare bones theming, and I've already made that clear, but 70% of this park has a woodsy feel that makes me feel good about myself. It has a classic charm that I enjoy being in. Gotham City, on the other hand, while having a kinetic energy, feels dead. Not necessarily that it's run down or lacks people, but it lacks a personality, if that makes sense. While in this land, Olivia notices Kid Flash and asks what that coaster was. Before arriving in Atlanta, I was explaining to the girls what rides we were going on, but I never explained Kid Flash to them because a month prior, they announced the coaster would never reopen. Obviously, that meant I never got to ride it. And it didn't even last a whole year because of major technical problems. So I had to explain to the girls what Kid Flash was and why it was closed. And they were shocked when I mentioned the drive tires breaking off and even a derailment. And yes, that did happen. On a kiddie coaster, no less. Passing Kid Flash, we headed for Riddler Mindbender, the classic Schwarzkopf custom looper known for intense vertical loops and airtime in the ravine. Of course, ever since the 2021 refurbishment, Mindbender has lost a good chunk of its airtime power. But you know what? I still felt the airtime. The two vertical loops packed the G-forces and I still felt the sharp pops on the turnarounds. Mindbender was comfortable despite being an over 40-year-old coaster. Yeah, the coaster's janky with a couple of rough patches, but that's the fun of an old Schwarzkopf. And it did not hurt, that's the key thing, it did not hurt. Pretty much the only genuine pain was that the brake run for whatever reason decided to square up against us.
Oh, ow! That last part hurt. No, that...
For whatever reason, the brake run suddenly came to an abrupt stop. This resulted in us jerking forward and whoa, pause, but basically, we suddenly moved forward, causing the lap bar to assault us right in the gut. The best way I would describe it is that imagine if someone slammed real hard on the brakes while in a car. Now, imagine a big metal brick on your lap when that happens. None of us expected that harsh stop since the brake run is comically long. The area where we stopped, we were nowhere near where the station was. And actually, the coaster went down for maintenance when we got off. This is where I should mention that this is where I started to feel the bad operations of Six Flags. The physical line was 2 ramps into the station, yet it took 20 minutes to queue because the dispatches were hovering around the 3-minute mark. Part of the reason is that this coaster, as well as several in this park for that matter, have a separate seatbelt and lap bar check that slows down the dispatches, and park guests are slow to board. So a wait that should have been 10 minutes ended up being double that. But we got on the coaster and it was a good time, but the coaster's wait kept getting longer and it broke down when we got off. That's another running theme, is that coasters kept breaking down when we entered the queue. After Mindbender, we tried to ride Batman the Ride next door. We never got around to riding Batman the Ride, because when we entered the queue line, the coaster broke down. Realistically, we could have just waited out that brake run, but we were in a time crunch. My aunt and the girl's mom were picking us up at 5 o'clock to go to a wedding dinner. Now, the park closed at 8 that day, but the issue was that that dinner ran until 9 o'clock, meaning no one would be able to pick us up. Now, looking back, if I was by myself, I probably should have just called an Uber to my hotel. But the other thing was that the girls needed to be at that event, and considering that all 3 of us have ridden a B&M invert before, we opted to leave the queue line thinking we would come back. We did not come back. Leaving Gotham City, we were now just exploring the park, hoping to run into the next coaster. And this is where I realized, damn, I enjoy this place. Between the pathway in between Twisted Cyclone and Goliath has a main street charm to it, and the fact this pathway is surrounded by trees help. We eventually entered the DC Kids area where Joker Funhouse coaster is. This is another one we did not get to ride because, well, It's a kiddie coaster. That's the last priority in a credit round. We were more interested in Georgia Gold Rusher. This is the new for 2025 Intamin Ultra Surf coaster. Originally, we were planning to ride this coaster next. That was until we witnessed the long queue into the station and instantly knew the wait would be too long. I mean, it makes sense. The coaster's brand new as of this recording, and the coaster can only run one train. And considering the slow operations, we opted to skip out on it. Luckily, Superman Ultimate Flight was nearby, so we headed over there. Heading up this narrow path to get to Superman is when I realized how hilly over Georgia was. I never realized how hilly some of these parks are, as when you look them up on Google, they look more flat than your ex-girlfriend. We see Superman running as we approach the entrance, but suspiciously, the train is empty. That's usually a red flag that the coaster's closed, as empty trains mean it's testing. And sure enough, the coaster was down. No worries, Great American Scream Machine is nearby. We entered the line for that Woody. Breaks down 5 minutes into the wait. Getting a little frustrated at this point since this is the 4th coaster breakdown today. Whatever. We went back to Superman since it was still testing, so we figured it must have reopened. Sure enough, Superman reopened and we thought the line was short. It was 2 short switchbacks and a staircase into the station, so I thought it would be around 10 to 20 minutes. It ended up taking 40 minutes to get on because the line was painstakingly slow. I believe this is for 2 reasons. First, B&M flyers are already slow loaders to begin with. In between dispatches, the operators have to wait for the train to lift into and out of the flying position to load and unload riders, which burns precious seconds. But this one specifically also has a moving floor used on inverted coasters, so that also burns seconds. Then Superman was only using one side of the station, and on top of that, the operators took 3 to 5 minutes per dispatches. I'm starting to think employees do not like working at Six Flags, which I understand since if you ever worked or even watched a video on working minimum wage, employees get paid pennies for how much bullshit they have to deal with. And at Six Flags over Georgia, a whole show goes on a lot at that park. Didn't they have that one shootout happen on opening day in the parking lot a while back? So a ride model with already slow load times and a crew having to deal with crap pay and policies meant it took a while to ride Superman, but we did ride it and it was a lot of fun. This B&M flying coaster simulates flying like Superman as you traverse these high off the ground turns integrated into over Georgia's terrain. Then you have 2 inversions. The inline twist is a slow roll of hang time, and the pretzel loop is still one of the most intense inversions of all time with all that G-force pressing down your face. The girls said that it was weird as they'd never ridden anything like it, which makes sense. I think either this or Tatsu is actually the closest flying coaster to Texas. After which, we went back to Great American Scream Machine, and this coaster was the very reason I decided to make this video, because I have some beef with this coaster. Not necessarily because the ride sucked, but because it had some of the worst operations I've ever had to endure. To paint the picture here, when we entered the queue line, the physical length was 3 switchbacks into the station, so you'd think it'd be like a 20 to 30 minute wait, right? Tell me why I waited 100 minutes for Scream Machine. That is nearly 2 hours wasted for this mid-Woody. The last time I waited 100 minutes for really anything was at Islands of Adventure 6 months prior for the 2 Intamins. And those coasters have very long queues with tons of people. Scream Machine only had 3 switchbacks filled, so there was 0 reasons to wait more than an hour. This coaster's wait time wrecked our whole schedule as it's the reason I missed out on nearly half the credits. The reason the wait was so long was twofold. First was Flash Pass. Unlike every other ride here where Flash Pass merged with the normal queue in the station, Flash Pass users for Scream Machine is at the exit, which effectively means Flash Pass users literally take up someone else's seat. I hate skip the line setups like this because it causes riders to wait in the normal queue to wait longer as Flash Pass users literally steals their seat. Now, I'm not a hater on skip the line systems. I think they're great. I hate skip the lines that are set up like this. The bigger issue here was that Flash Pass were taking up the entire train, causing the main standby queue to wait longer. This would consistently happen with every other train, or sometimes Flash Pass would board 2, 3, or even 4 trains before standby could board. Considering they were running 2 trains, they were practically running Scream Machine at 1 train for standby. Compounding the issue further is that this had one of, if not the slowest operations I think I've ever had to witness. We timed the dispatches to 6.5 minutes. What the actual f***? That is tremendously slow, even by this park standards. I know it's extremely subjective how short it is for it to be considered fast dispatches. By my counts, anything under 2 minutes is considered fast operations. Any more, especially over 3 minutes, we start to have issues. Oh, come on! Keep in mind that my home park is Busch Gardens, Tampa. I'm already used to painfully slow operations, where dispatches take over 2 minutes, 1 train operations, and tons of ride closures. Yet somehow Six Flags was worse. At Over Georgia, 3 to 5 minute dispatches were pretty much commonplace, which is the reason why lines here move at the pace of a snail. For whatever reason, one thing after another would cause dispatches to take forever to run. The worst part is when you break down the wait time. The main queue with the 3 switchbacks is used, that alone took 40 minutes. But then I decided to wait extra for the front row. The reason for that is that if you notice, the on-ride POV I've been showing you has been of my own. And no, I'm not whipping out my phone and risking getting an accidental assault charge on me. I'm not an idiot. Rather, I use either a chest-mounted GoPro, or in this case, either metal Ray-Bans or eye view glasses secured by an athletic strap. The latter is what I primarily use to secure POVs. And I typically like to sit in the front row to get the cleanest POV, meaning every coaster I rode at Over Georgia that day has been in the front row. When I entered the front row queue, the wait was 7 trains deep. So I thought, okay, maybe another 20 minutes. That bitch took another whole damn hour because of the aforementioned issues with flash pass and loading. So waiting in line for Scream Machine was a torturous mind as the line took longer to move than it did for paint to dry. The only thing that made the wait bearable, aside from talking to the girls, was meeting 2 guys waiting behind me for front row. We'll call them Trace and Grayson. How we met was that Grayson was asking me about this unk in front of us. But one thing after another, we just kept talking to these guys and realized these dudes are chill as hell. The entire conversation for the next 30 minutes was just us, including this other guy, Frank, messing around and cracking jokes. That was honestly a good time. Looking back, I think the reason I messed with them was that they reminded me a lot of some of my homies in school like Trent or Carson. So we're just talking about stuff and joking about the coaster, claiming that the wait is not worth it for this coaster and that it probably would rot to crap. Finally, I sat in the front row for a Great American Scream Machine where me, Olivia, and Emily waited dang near 2 hours for to get this POV. I never got that POV for Great American Scream Machine. I found this out right when we hit the brakes. During the ride, I felt like my glasses were not recording. I checked to see if the glasses were recording. They were not, and I thought I forgot to press record. That was until I plugged them into my computer days later and found an unusable file. Turns out, I did get a POV for Scream Machine, but for one reason or another, the files were corrupted. I think what happened here was that the ride was so rough, it caused the camera to malfunction and corrupt the files. This is where I need to talk about the ride experience because I have some serious thought. Great American Scream Machine is a classic PTC Woody from collaboration of John C. Allen, William Cobb, and Don Rosser. And this thing has not been maintained well at all. Scream Machine has quite the reputation for being one of the roughest coasters of all time. And you know what? Scream Machine felt like the cheapest shopping cart built by your perverted uncle rolling down glass shards. The entire thing jackhammers the entire duration as you feel every bounce and crack. This is what I would call a ride that rot to crap. But the weird thing is that I actually like Scream Machine. Yes, this Woody beats you up like a golf cart during an earthquake. But I like rough Woodies as I have a high tolerance to roughness and it makes everything feel like a joke. Plus, this thing has airtime. Granted, it's the weakest of floater with some hills having less power than SpongeBob, but you know what? I still enjoyed it as most of the airtime has these weak bouncy airtime. And I think in this case, some roughness helped as smoothed out weak airtime would have been boring, but Scream Machine seriously screwed us over. We still needed to ride 6 coasters, and it was already 4 o'clock when we got off. We had to be out of the park at 5 p.m. And this was further reinstated when my aunt called to tell us that they'd be picking us up at 5. Now logically, the next ride to go on would be Blue Hawk, the old school Vekoma looper as it's right next to Scream Machine. That looper never opened all day, and it's still closed as of when this video is uploaded. And no, before anyone asks, Blue Hawk is not unreliable. The reason for that was that Six Flags was doing some landscaping work around Blue Hawk, and that landscape work wasn't finished for the opening month, but it will reopen later this year. I should mention that I went during the second weekend of operation for Over Georgia this year. This is important because parks that just opened from their off season for the year tend to have operational issues as they adjust to the normal operating schedule. So Over Georgia's might improve operationally as the season progresses. The operation will still suck, but they shouldn't be as bad as during my visit. But with 1 hour to spare, we knew we only had time for 1 ride, so we went back to Gold Rusher to see if it got shorter. and it ended up being longer than it was when we first passed it. So that's another one we missed, which was a shame since that's the new kid on the block. So Gold Rusher would have taken too long and Blue Hawk is closed. What do we have left? We have Delonica and Joker. Both are family coasters. We can skip that today. That left either Batman or Georgia Scorcher as our last ride of the day. We ended up going for Georgia Scorcher for a couple of reasons. For one, with Batman, while that coaster is objectively better, that's not a unique coaster. Not only did all three of us ride a B&M invert before, but Emily and Olivia have ridden a Batman clone at Over Texas. Not to mention there's 2 other Batman clones 3 hours away in San Antonio. Georgia Scorcher, on the other hand, is one of only 3 B&M stand-ups still operating as a stand-up. And there's a good reason for that. The general consensus is that the stand-up coasters are painful due to a combination of leg, head, and nut pain. And yes, I did say nut pain, which for you guys in particular, it means your balls are going to be smacked around. I would describe what that feeling is like, but I ran out of nut jokes to use. Luckily, I found this band commercial that describes the model perfectly.
What's going on? Everybody's cooling down. Now the band. I've never seen anything like this. There goes my popcorn. Stripey, no!
Despite Batman being the objectively better attraction, Scorcher was unique. When I was telling Emily and Olivia about Scorcher, they've never even heard of standing up on a coaster. Which makes sense. The last stand-up to operate in Texas closed in 2005. So needless to say, they've never ridden a stand-up. With me, the only other stand-up I've ridden was Pipeline the Surf Coaster. And that is in its own league entirely. So for all of us, it was a rare model that we should try once. Plus, the coaster was right next to the entrance. So if my aunt got to the park by the time we got on, we would already be right next to the exit. Now, I was surprised how short the physical length is. The line was 2 pathways directed into the station. I didn't know that. When I first passed by this coaster in the morning, I thought that was a whole queue house in the station filled. Despite being physically short, it still took another hour to ride it. For one, stand-ups are painstakingly slow loaders. This is because each stand-up has to be adjusted to accommodate each person by their height. Made complicated is the fact these adjustable restraints are extremely stiff. Like, they're stiffer than a Gooner's full body pillow, which is just disgusting. They were actually a challenge trying to position and hold the restraints in place when they lock, and they have to do this individually for the 32 stands. And then you have the employees who, like I said earlier, probably goes through the motion dealing with crap working conditions for crap pay. But an additional issue that caused the slow lines was that I didn't even know this until I waited in line for it. Scorcher was only running 1 train. Why? Why are you running 1 train for an already low capacity ride? Outside of those that can physically only run 1 train, every other coaster here was running at least 2. So why 1 train here? Well, I know why. The second train was probably in pieces. Not that I actually saw the second train in pieces, but a similar thing happened when I rode Pantheon a couple years back. And when I rode Pantheon, that was during Virginia spring break. And here, I went before Atlanta spring break. So it made sense to me in my head. When we boarded the trains, it was a chore adjusting the restraints because of how hard they were and keeping them in place. See, I was trying to jam my shoulders into the over-the-shoulder restraint so that the bike seat isn't resting on my balls. This is crucial because the bike seat is the main cause on why stand-ups feel like your girlfriend the moment you restrict her Target shopping sprees. And the restraints locked right above my groin, so I ended up having to slide my feet against the backboard like I'm tiptoeing so that I have a few more inches between the bike seat. And this helped because I actually like the coaster. Now, it's worth noting that right before I got on, I watched a tutorial on how to ride stand-ups. Yeah, that's right. There's a how-to video online on how to ride stand-ups. Which, you know what? Helped because I came off in no pain, no headaches, no busting nuts in the wrong way.
Whoa, pause. That sounded way too sus.
My legs were a little sore, but that's to be expected since this has some positives and I've been walking around the park all day. The 2 inversions and some of the valleys have nice positive and laterals, but the most memorable part for me was that anytime the coaster changes elevation, there's a falling sensation. I'm not referring to airtime because, frankly, that's impossible on a ride like this. Rather, it feels like the floor is dropping under you. This creates an uneasy lifting sensation that I'm honestly not used to. It honestly made for a memorable ride. And that was it. That was my visit to Over Georgia. After Scorcher, we left the park, got some footage of the park from the outside, hopped in the whip, and went to the wedding dinner. So overall thoughts of the park. First of all, the operational issues were a big problem during my visit as the slow moving lines made getting everything done a pain in the back. If they can fix that, Over Georgia is a genuinely great park. The coaster collection is stacked with an elite duo of Goliath and Twisted Twisted Cyclone. While some lands in the park are plain as bread, most of the park has a charm to it, especially in areas like where Monster Mansion is, which has a woodsy feel to it. That's another thing I'd like to bring up. I'd hope to come back at some point to get the full experience. Experience the missed coasters, re-ride some favorites, and ride some notable non-coasters as well, mainly Monster Mansion and Acrophobia. I wanted to try these two, but Acrophobia was getting repainted, and I simply ran out of time for Monster Mansion. Luckily, I'm in Atlanta all the time, so hopefully it won't be too long before I can come back. So that is it. That is my trip report for Six Flags Over Georgia on March 22nd, 2025. If there's anything you think I should know about Over Georgia, leave them all in the comments. If you liked this video, which you watched my dumb yap for over 20 minutes, so you probably did, I need you all to smash the like button. Also, please consider subscribing with notifications turned on. That way, it alerts you and other potential viewers when the next video is uploaded. Finally, watch some of these other videos of me yapping for 15 minutes. Do all of these, you're now breathing in manual mode. This is the Coaster Flood, riding out.